So now we get to the second brief topic, and that is, what are these radical changes that are impacting us? And what are the areas that we as Muslims are having to grapple with in light of all of these changes? Because we have a different set of changes. Not only are we grappling with the same changes Catholics and Protestants and religious observant Jewish folks are grappling with, we have our own unique set of challenges living in the West as well. For Muslims living in the West, all of these changes has come crashing onto our heads. Or to be more precise, you guys have been born into the equivalent of tsunamis and tidal waves and multiple whirlpools crashing all around you, while your parents and your community expects you to remain absolutely dry, right? It's not your fault. There are so many battles going on, tidal waves coming, and these issues, it's not your fault. You weren't born. You didn't choose to be born in this era. But this is Allah's test on us, that we have to deal with these changes of a cataclysmic nature. And so, what are some of the areas that we are grappling with as a Muslim community? Today, I'm going to demarcate 7 large areas. And this is not a comprehensive list, but it is a template for where our class is heading. It's going to be a broad idea of some of the concepts that we're going to grapple with throughout the rest of these series of classes. So I'm going to begin with 2 that I call internal identity crises. So the first 2 are internal crises, not necessarily dealing with external issues right now. The first 2 are internal identity crises. I'm going to list 7 of them. So number 1, one of the issues we have to face with, can I get some water? Some water, sorry. In the back there, sorry. One of the issues that we have to face with being born and raised in the West is we are exposed to almost 14 centuries of theological and legal controversies the minute we walk into our mosques. What I want you to realize is that you all, by merely walking around this room and talking to people, by merely logging onto YouTube and listening to 5, 10, 20 Islamic preachers and lectures, by merely going mosque to mosque and speaking to the people at those mosques, you all are introduced to a more diverse group of Muslims in a week or in an hour on YouTube than your great-grandfathers would have been exposed to in an entire lifetime. Let that sink in. Your great-grandfathers, in all likelihood, had no idea of the diversity of the faith internally. They had no idea of the sheer spectrum of ideas, controversies, theologies, madhabs, firqas, trends. They were born, they were raised, they died in one locality, and at max there were 2 or 3 little different firqas out there. Each one of them is culturally, in its own little bubble, and that's about it. And yet the average Muslim amongst you is exposed to not just the current, but the classical and the ones all over the world. As I said, you are exposed to a greater diversity in a few hours online than most of our great-grandfathers would have been exposed to in an entire lifetime. So you have to get up to date as soon as possible. You have to understand an entire myriad of information, and that's not even beginning modernity. We're talking about yesterday's, controversies. So updating the old. This is the first issue. Navigating classical, navigating sectarianism, navigating the various trends of the ummah that we're all familiar with in this part of the world. And also realize here in the West as well, we are exposed much more than in the East, even though modernity has introduced this to the East as well. Yet still, by and large, in Muslim majority countries, by and large, the trends are a little bit less. Whereas in Muslim minority countries, because we all mix in the same mosque, right? Because all of us ethnically and socially and culturally and politically all come together, we are exposed to a vast array, a vast spectrum of Muslims from around the globe following different interpretations, different shuyukh, different scholarships, different trends, much more than the average cousin of ours back home. And that's one of the ironies of living in the West. So this is the first issue that we have to deal with. The second issue, still internally, is that not just theological, not just spiritual, not just legal, but we are now grappling with cultural Islam, the cultural Islam of our parents and the cultural Islam of the land that we have been born and raised in. So not only do we have to deal with the issue of the spectrum of theology, the spectrum of law, the spectrum of spirituality, we also have the reality that there is a cultural clash that is infused with religion as well. Culture is not devoid of religion, and religion is not devoid of culture. The two are intertwined. Nowhere in the world does Islam exist except within a culture. That's just the reality. Nowhere in the world is Islam in a vacuum. So in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Nigeria, in Pakistan, in Arabia, there are manifestations of Islam that have taken centuries to evolve and are conducive to their culture. Our parents migrated here by and large, and almost all of us are children of immigrants, and we're born and raised attached to a cultural milieu, and yet at the same time, that culture is not our culture. It is the culture of our grandparents. It is the culture even of our parents. Yet we are very, very much traversing multiple cultures. Almost everybody sitting here is bilingual, trilingual. Almost everybody sitting here is fully comfortable in multiple cultures. And automatically this raises the very awkward question, what is the cultural Islam? Don't have to necessarily follow. What is the manifestation of the cultural Islam? This isn't theology, this isn't spirituality, this isn't law, this is now cultural Islam. And we all understand that there's nothing wrong with cultural manifestations of Islam, but the culture that I find myself in, or my children's culture, is not the culture of my parents. So we have another set of issues to deal with, and that is rediscovering, or I should say uncovering, not rediscovering, uncovering what it means to be a second generation hyphenated Muslim in America, hyphenated Arab American, Desi American, Somali American. We're all hyphenated American, because the irony, as you're all aware, is that an Arab American and a Desi American share more in common, in spite of the fact that their parents are from opposite cultures, than they do with their first cousins back home, right? An Egyptian American and a Pakistani American born and raised here have a greater rapport. They have a shared heritage. They have a shared inside jokes. They have a shared cultural understanding that is more at home amongst each other than they do with their biological cousins back home. And that is because we have a unique hyphenated Islamic culture that is being created as we quite literally live in this generation. So that's a second issue that we have to grapple with. And this is a live issue, but it is still internal. It is being created, it is happening, it is a discourse, and we are the ones in charge of it. So we have to embrace it, but with wisdom and knowledge. So that is the second set of issues we have to deal with. So the first, as we said, is the old school stuff, and that's internal. The second is new school internal. Is that clear, right? The first is old school internal. The second is new school internal, because that's what we're dealing with right now. Then we move on to the next, we're 7 issues, right? The next issues, number 3 and number 4. Number 3 and number 4 are external faith-based, not internal. Number 1 and 2 is internal. I hope you're following, guys, right? Number 1 and 2 is internal faith-based. Number 3 and 4 is external faith-based. So the third set of issues, and remember, all of these 7 issues, we're going to come back to them throughout the course of this class, inshallah ta'ala. That's the whole point of this class. The third set of issues, and each one of these issues has multiple areas underneath it, is the reality of dealing with the loss of religious identity in the modern world. And this is something we share with every other mainstream faith out there. The Catholics, the Mormons, the Protestants, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Jewish, every single religion out there, they are facing an attrition rate amongst their youth. Without exception. There's not a single exception to this rule, by the way. Every single faith community in the Western world is facing attrition. Not a single one of them has more youth embracing their faith than the elders. Every one of them is facing a crisis. Now, it is said, and I hope this is true, that our rate of attrition is less than other faiths. Inshallah, I hope it is true. Anecdotally, it might be true. But we are still facing an attrition. We're still facing the loss of faith. According to one survey done by a leading institute, up to 20% of people born to Muslim families in this country did not identify as Muslim when they reach adulthood. Now, this is a survey. As you're all aware, surveys have their pros and cons and their ups and downs and whatnot, and perhaps that might be a little bit skewed or exaggerated, but it is a frightening statistic nonetheless. 1 out of 5. And also, anecdotally, I don't think it might be too far from the truth, because we, when we're within our mosque communities, we feel validated. But when you go to the outside world, when you work in, corporate America, when you teach in academia, you actually come across a lot of cultural Muslims. You come across a lot more people who were born into Muslim families and really, by and large, don't identify or nominally identify as Muslim. And so that is definitely a major issue here, that we're having crises of faith. This is the third issue out of the 7. Is religion real? Does God exist? Is my faith true? Is my faith the one and true faith, right? Or is there another faith out there? Now, again, anecdotally, we as Muslims don't have a problem, by and large, of losing our faith for another faith, which is not the case in other faith traditions. We have a problem of simply losing faith, right? i.e., in many other faith traditions, one finds a good percentage of their youth leave the faith, and another good percentage find another faith, right? Whereas for us, apparently, statistics seem to indicate that by and large, we do not have any crises of people embracing other faiths en masse. Rather, we do have a crisis of Muslims just abandoning the faith, becoming agnostic, becoming, just not believing. And so for us, it's not a question of, is my religion the right one or is another religion the right one? For us, the question for us, meaning for us Muslims in the Western world, the question is, does God exist? Meaning my God. Is religion true? Meaning my religion. And that is a question that I'm sure many of you are also familiar with, people who are grappling with the same issue. So this is the third category of issues that modernization and secularization has brought to our table. The fourth is not necessarily doubting the essence of the faith, but doubting aspects of the faith, which then leads to doubting the faith itself, right? In other words, the fourth issue, and we're going to spend quite a lot of time in this one over the course of, inshallah, our classes eventually. The fourth issue is attempting to reconcile modern notions of virtue and modern notions of ethics and modern notions of morality with the notions that stem from our own faith. There seems to be irreconcilable differences between what we are taught is virtue, what we are taught is correct, what we are taught is noble, versus interpretations of our faith. And this leads to an entire spectrum of activism, from rejecting the faith to radically reinterpreting, to claiming that the truth of the faith has not yet been understood until this new idea comes, to an embrace of fundamentalism, and a whole bunch of spectrums in between. And in fact, I've spoken about this in quite a lot of detail, and I've categorized like 8 or 9 different spectrums on this issue of trying to reconcile something that is perceived to be true from a virtue standpoint, from an ethical standpoint, with the faith. How does one do so? And this is where gender issues, gender roles, sexuality, jihad, war, peace, prophetic ideals, incidents in the seerah, Quranic verses, Quranic commandments. These are all of this comes under category number 4, where there are notions in the Quran, there are verses in the Quran, there are incidents in the seerah, there are Islamic commandments, there are Islamic prescripts, there are Islamic ideals that at face value, prima facie, appear to be completely at odds with modern sensibilities, right? What does one do with this? Again, there's an entire spectrum and so many areas over here. But again, this is, I would say, the fourth area. Because again, so the third is basically, is religion true? Is God existing or not? And the fourth is kind of sort of similar, but you're not beginning with the premise, is God true or not? It's like, well, if Islam is true, how could Islam teach this, right? So you could put 3 and 4 together, and that's technically okay to do, but we're going to separate them because they really are slightly different areas. So the fourth, as we said, is external faith-based ethics issue. The third is external faith-based existential issue. Does God exist? Is religion true? Do we need religion? So that's the third and the fourth area. Then the final 3, 5th, 6th, and 7th, are socio-political arenas of dispute. Number 5, The fifth area where Muslims in the West are grappling with is identity, integration, and assimilation. What does it mean to be a Muslim in the modern world? To what extent does my faith, my culture, my value allow me to integrate? And what does integration imply? What does it mean? To what extent am I even allowed to assimilate? Where do I draw the line? What level of independence must I retain? So these are aspects of personal identity vis-a-vis the broader world that we live in. This is number 5. Number 6, one of the issues that we have to navigate in our generation is the reality of Islamophobia. And this is something that your generation in particular, you have been born into. You have to realize I wasn't born into that generation at all. I didn't understand. There was no such thing, by and large, Islamophobia. I was born in the 70s, remember. Islamophobia, by and large, began post 9/11. Like, yeah, sure, there were some minor things here and there, but Muslims, Islam was so exotic. It was, most people never heard of us. They never knew who we were. And we could act, talk, dress as exotic as we wanted. In my fundamentalist years, and I lived many fundamentalist years, which I don't regret at all. In my fundamentalist years, I would dress completely in an Islamic garb in the airport and whatnot, and not a single person even looked at me as a second glance. It was completely the norm, right? Immediately after 9/11, everything changed. You could do and talk and say and get away with so much more, because Islamophobia as a concept really was not something that I was ever exposed to. You know, of course there were minor incidents here and there, but that's just common, racism, if you like, not quite Islamophobia. But the Islamophobic industry, the rise of an entire, complex of Islamophobia as a political tactic and tool, then the very fact that presidential candidates are both invoking our religion and mentioning Islam and Muslims, and they're bringing Muslims on stage, this is unprecedented. And it's not just in America, across the Western globe as well. And so your identities in particular, you are being shaped, whether you know it or not, by reacting to Islamophobia. And you have to be very careful that your identities transcend reactionary stereotypes. You can't afford to base your identity on a reaction to Islamophobia. It has to be more than that, right? So navigating the complex reality of Islamophobia, right? And how one does that. This is a 6th category we're going to have to discuss as well. And the 7th and final one, and remember this list is not exhaustive, the 7th and final one is the one that is the most pressing right now as we see what's happening in the world, and that is balancing our political and religious loyalties. Being a citizen of this country while being a part of the Ummah. What does it mean to be an American, born and raised here, carrying an American blue passport, paying taxes, and frankly, enjoying the freedoms of this country? What does it mean to flout that passport at every foreign airport? What does it mean to puff up with pride and anger when somebody dares disrespect you in another country, say, I'm an American? And yet your country and my country is engaged in a genocide. We are doing in Gaza and across the world what we're all aware what we are doing. How does one balance those two identities? That's a very difficult and complex topic as well. And this is not the first time. We had to do this multiple times. I mean, this is reiteration, post 9/11, multiple times this has happened, right? So you guys are like the 3rd iteration now, but this was, right after 9/11 was one of the first topics like this came. Can you serve in the military? That was the first fatwa that Qardawi and others had to answer post 9/11. Like an American serviceman asked the fiqh councils of the world, what do I do? I'm a conscripted serviceman. Am I allowed to go? Am I allowed to do that? What not? So that began back then. And we're still dealing with this reality to this day. So these are topics that, again, inshallah ta'ala, we will discuss. So given the changes that have taken place, given these 7 areas that are directly impacting us, clearly there is a need for a place to discuss all of these ideas in light of these changes while we retain our authentic Islamic identity, and hence this class and the idea of lighthouse. Just like a lighthouse warns you of dangers and provides a safe passage, the goal here, inshallah ta'ala, is that this class will point out the dangers. Sometimes we can't necessarily save you because you're the ship, you're the one in charge. We're just pointing out, hey, careful, beware of this, right? And this is where we come to the awkward reality. And I'm telling you from now, don't think I have solved all of these problems. If that is your attitude, if that is your conception, then I will, disavow you of that from the get-go. I am in this just as much as you are. I might be a little bit older than you, okay, maybe a little bit more well-read than you, okay, but these are problems of our generation. They haven't been solved. They have not categorically been solved. Sure, discussions have taken place. Sure, there are a number of, various views out there, but the discussions are too nascent, they're too new to have formed definitive orthodoxies, and we are battling with this as we speak. And so today's introductory talk was really meant to introduce you to the concept, the need, and the idea, and to underscore that this series, inshallah ta'ala, will be a series that focuses on modern issues for a modern audience. I am not interested in this particular series in a traditional halaqah. There's nothing wrong with traditional halaqah because that has its place as well. I've been through my seminary education and there is a need and a time and a place for seminary discussion. However, me personally, for this series, I am far more interested in the topics that are being discussed in the cafes and in the university lounges rather than in the seminaries around the world. I'm more interested in discussing what is of actual relevance to the average Muslim who hasn't gone through a trained program. That is a different time and a place. And so the goal of this series is to tap into modern struggles, modern conversations, modern controversies, so that inshallah ta'ala, collectively, we can attempt to carve out a lighthouse, attempt to carve out a safe passage, and try, inshallah ta'ala, to at least form a better understanding of the world that we live in. Now, the format of this series is going to be somewhat different than other traditional halaqas or even classes that I've given. My goal, after today actually, because today was an exception, it's introduction, and the goal will be that we send out every single week the topic, the broad topic of the upcoming week, and I want you all to do your own research. I want you all to introduce to me thinkers and ideas that I might not be aware of, concepts and controversies, because again, this is a vast field. We're all in this together, and I have no doubt that some of you have read much more than I have in every single niche and area. So collectively, let's come together. Every time the topic is announced, feel free to do your own research, introduce your fellow students to various ideas and figures and personas, and we're going to come, have a discussion, and then inshallah open the floor for dialogue. After I give a brief talk, maybe half the time will be, me speaking. The other half is going to be collectively sharing our wisdom. Now, how we're going to share that wisdom, Mustafa and others, we're going to figure out, because we have, mashallah, a lot of people here. We have to figure out how to cull all of that, inshallah ta'ala.